everyone, Aimer back with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time we are putting a ribbon on Season 6 with the last episode, episode 22, which is called Trapped. So this one starts out in what is clearly a Chinatown. But no, it's Southeast Asia, the TV says so. Some soldiers roll into a military barracks with payroll money, but are surrounded and robbed by some bad guys who bust their way out of the facility. Jim goes to get instructions at an unkempt lifeguard station locker. The mission, that was $8 million those guys stole, and conventional law enforcement is sure that it was masterminded by the criminal Stafford family, but have no leads. The IMF must recover the money. In the apartment scene, we hear Casey singing a song in the style of Doug Stafford's old girlfriend Lily, who died tragically somehow, and Doug has never been the same since. We also hear some other planning. The Stafford's brother-in-law, Ed Fenton, who is one of their drivers, pulls up to his usual gas station on a return trip from Mexico, and the IMF take the opportunity to chloroform him and his security man to take them and the truck out of the picture. Doug's brother Art and wheelchair-bound father Joe are outraged at the loss of their truck, and the brothers have what seems to be an argument that they've had many times before about how to handle business properly, accusing each other of all sorts of things. They try and reassure their sister Molly that her husband Ed will be found safe, and it's clear she's also sick of skirt-chasing drunk Doug. Jim and Barney show up to the home with Ed's wallet, saying that they're part of an organization that can help the Staffords with security, as they seem to need it, and Barney shows that he knows a lot about their business, giving them until the next morning to decide. Art says he'll let them know and gets their man Broyles to follow them to check up on them. Doug offers to step up and take charge of security instead, but Art and Joe tell him that unless he can prove that he's changed and straightened up for at least a month, they can't trust him to do the job, and Doug says he's up for the challenge. Broyles follows Jim and Barney's car, but Willie strategically drives his stalled truck to run interference to shake them off. Jim approaches Doug privately and says he wants to make a deal with him alone, as he's a smart one and Art is obviously jealous of it. He tells Doug to meet him at the Club Tempo tonight, where waitress Annette seems to take a liking to Jim. He tells her he's meeting Doug there, and her mood changes suddenly. She warns him that Doug is extremely unstable and prone to fits of anger. Doug arrives and orders his usual double scotch, with the bartender informing Art about him being there with Jim. Art wisely considers how things have started to go wrong recently and how it's not a coincidence that this guy has just shown up. So he tells Broyles to find and kill Jim. Jim tells Doug that his organization sees that Joe is too old to be of any consequence anymore and they can't deal with Art, so they want Doug to eliminate Art. And Jim warns him that Art is already planning to liquidate him. Doug is incredulous as he says that Art has a code about family. He would never do that, regardless of the circumstances. Jim leaves and is followed by the thugs who sideswipe him. Broyles manages to shoot Jim with the semi-automatic, but police sirens force him away before he can finish the job. And he informs Art and Joe, who are concerned that Doug met with Jim without telling them about it. Casey starts singing, and Doug is absolutely mesmerized with memories of Lily. They sit and chat for a while, with Casey calling herself Lisa Prescott and turning on the charm. She invites him over to her place. Annette warns her to be careful because he'll expect her to be another Lily, and he could get really angry and violent if she doesn't. An older lady sees that Jim's bleeding, and it turns out he has amnesia, so he wanders the streets. Willie and Barney worry about his absence, but Barney says they have to continue with the plan. At Casey's place, Doug wonders how she can afford it. She gives Doug a spiked drink, and he gets a bit testy, telling her to get dressed in something blue. Casey sends a signal to Barney, who calls Casey's phone. She tells Doug to let it ring, but eventually he gets annoyed at seeing a picture of Art in the apartment, and he picks up the phone where Barney plays a tape of Art's voice asking for Casey as Lisa. Casey returns to the room, where Doug confronts her angrily about Art. Casey claims that she was involved with Art, but it's over, as Doug feels the effect of the drug and keels over. Jim walks by the Club Tempo and hears Casey singing in his mind, disturbed, not understanding what the memories mean. Willie comes over and gives Doug an injection, waking him up to Casey's living room, where Willie confronts him at gunpoint and calls him by his name, making Doug realize that he must be a hitman sent by Art. Casey comes up from behind and slugs Willie with a statue or something, rescuing Doug, who is amazed at the turn of events. and advises her to get out of town because apparently there will be a family rumble now. Jim enters the club, and a concerned Annette tries to help him, but all he wants are answers to what happened that evening. Annette tells him he was there earlier, and he asks for her help to figure things out. She hopefully agrees as the bartender sees them together, calling Art again about it. Art tells the bartender to keep Jim there, and Broyles is dispatched to finish him off. It's closing time, so Annette says they can't stay, but offers to take Jim to her place, and the bartender makes only a half-hearted attempt, not even a quarter-hearted attempt really, to stop them from leaving. Broyles arrives and gets miffed at the bartender's lameness, but he gets Annette's address and heads over. Doug visits Barney at his hotel. He says he'll agree to their deal as long as he's in charge, he calls the shots, and they provide men for his confrontation with Art. Barney says that's fine, but for such a proposition, they'll need $2 million up front. Art hesitates at first, but says he can get it, as long as Barney rides shotgun for him for protection, and Barney agrees. At Annette's place, Jim sees a matchbook for the Westin Hotel where the IMF is based. He remembers something about it. He calls there, asking the confused desk clerk if he's registered there. The clerk says yes. Barney and Doug come down the elevator and hear the call, and they hear the clerk say Mr. Rayburn, but Jim hangs up before Barney can talk to him. Jim wants to go back to the hotel, but Annette begs him to stay to avoid whoever is trying to hurt him, and he agrees. The Stafford's courier puts his briefcase in an airport locker and prepares to mail the key to Art, but Doug and Barney come up behind him and take it. Doug checks the bag and finds the $8 million in the form of emeralds, as Barney signals cops to surround him. Art appears nearby and, seeing the trouble, tries to dash away, but is caught and tackled by Willie, who demands answers about Jim. Art calls the club, just catching the bartender before he leaves and getting Annette's number. Barney calls, giving his name to Annette, but the name doesn't mean anything to Jim at first. Barney insists on talking to him as the hitmen are on their way, and they do pull up as Jim takes the phone. Barney tries to jog Jim's memory, reminds him of all the things that have happened. Finally, Jim gets his memory back as the thugs break in, and Peter Graves' stunt double is able to subdue them. The money is recovered, and the Staffords are led away. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of D. I was prepared. I went into this one thinking to myself, you know what? This is one of those ones, very much like Image from a few episodes ago, where I'm going to have to give it an F, or maybe I'll find some little nugget and give it a D-. Let me talk it out, and I'll tell you how I arrived at D. It hurts me a little bit to do this, but starting with the good. I like the fact that Arthur Stafford, played by John Sivert, who's a fine actor, at least shows some competence in this episode. It's refreshing to me. It doesn't happen as often as I wish it would happen, where one of the antagonists, one of the marks, figures out that, oh, wait a minute, it can't just be a coincidence that all these things are happening just as these guys showed up. So that at least is good. He deals with it in the way that you would expect. He deals with it in a proper and reasonable way for the type of character that he is. So I did like that part of the episode where Art is at least not a complete pushover. The struggle with the grade really revolved for me around the character of Annette. You know, just as I came into this, and here is what I wrote, okay, in my previous blurb. Sharon Acker, as a helpful Annette, is even lamer in this episode than in Homecoming, which should not be possible according to the laws of physics. So I wrote, I hate saying that about a fellow Toronto girl. It's not her fault. This is just a clunker of a cookie-cutter separate and mislead plot with a twist that doesn't really work. That's what I wrote. I stand by some of it. The thing is, with Annette, in watching this episode, I got hit with something, and darn you producers, this was a really, really dirty trick. When Annette is trying to help Jim in her apartment, asking him, pleading with him, please don't go to that hotel, people are obviously trying to hurt you, the producers put in the oboe of Gabby from Hunted. They did that, and I was just like, oh man, you know, you had to do that. And that's when I realized that, you know what, I can't be unfair to Annette in that way. She qualifies as an incidental character. You know, she's not part of the plot, but she's just there, and she gets involved, and she's helpful. That's what an incidental character is. I retract my previous comment. And you know, again, that one tugged on my heartstrings a bit because I remembered Gabby, and I said, you know what, when a character is this, you know, at least good and kind-hearted, I can't, you know, I don't know. Let me just leave it at that. She turned this basically from a D- into a D when I realized that. That said, I have a bit of a point-counterpoint here. This is a cookie-cutter separate and mislead plot, okay? I would not say that this is a great plot in any sense of the word. However, I will give it credit. I'll give the writers credit that they at least avoided the main trap of the separate and mislead plot, which I've mentioned before. The biggest problem, if you don't recall, with these separate and mislead plots is that in many cases, in almost all cases, the wedge between the antagonists seems to come from almost nowhere. I've said before, you've got people who are thick as thieves. You know, they have a shared goal. They've been together for years. And sometimes they're even family, although I can't think of an example right now. And the IMF is able to drive a wedge between them over what is essentially nothing. This time, it is much easier to understand, and it's much more cogent and coherent in the story. The sibling rivalry between these brothers, that's a tale as old as time, right? So it makes perfect sense. The wedge is already there, and the IMF just needs to exploit it. So I will give the writers credit for that, and that's another factor in turning this from an F to a D- to a D. Before I go to things that are completely bad, about the singing in this episode, I appreciate that Linda Day George was given an opportunity to sing. I read from the Mission Impossible dossier that the song that she sings here is called The Gentle Rain. She was in a movie called The Gentle Rain where she starred with her husband, Chris George, who you will remember from the episode Nerves. And that's fine. Just like in season 3, Barbara Bain was given an opportunity to, you know, sing and dance in the episode Illusion. I assume that that's something that she wanted to do. You know, it's fine. I understand it, okay? But it's padding. You know, there's 4 whole television minutes devoted to it, and I just think that that was too much. It just becomes obvious padding at that point, and I guess we can just kind of leave it at that. Contrast it, for example, to Leslie Warren in Flipside. Leslie Warren is a singer, and she was able to do some singing in that episode. They did not spend that much time on it in that episode. You can go back and watch. It was only a minute, maybe a minute and a half tops. Okay? And that's all right. You're establishing her that, well, she's a singer. Okay, that's fine. But 4 minutes, that was way too much. And that's where it just becomes really, really, really obvious padding. That said, you know, the producers did it out of deference, I guess, to Linda Day George, and I do understand that. I don't know this for absolutely certain, but I do read in the Mission Impossible dossier where Linda Day George announced at the end of season 6 that she was pregnant. And that I do know for sure because it's in the book. But what I don't know is whether her contract status may have been a little bit up in the air or whatever. So that's why the producers gave her this opportunity, because they weren't sure when and if she was going to be back. That I don't know. But, you know, you'll see how that shakes out in season 7. Moving on to the stuff that is bad. I've already mentioned that the plot is cookie cutter, right? Despite some of the nice things that I've already mentioned. The amnesia angle is really lame, really contrived, and it just doesn't click I think that's what I would say. I get it. I understand that, what the writers were trying to do. You have to have something in this episode to kind of separate Jim from the rest of the team, and to have that ending come together. But to me, it just screams out, just like, I already commented that all of the singing that Linda Day George got to do is padding. Yeah, I really think that the writers didn't have enough here in the main plot that they had to shoehorn that subplot into this. It fits with the story. It's, the story doesn't lose any of its coherence or cogency, but oh my gosh, it's so over the top. And like I said, I know what you're doing. I can see through it. Finally, I don't know quite how to say this without sounding mean. I hope it doesn't sound mean. Bert Convy, bless his heart, he's no longer with us. Rest in peace, Mr. Convy. He's just horribly miscast here. Most people, if like me, if you're in North America, you'll probably remember him as a game show host. And that started, I believe, in the mid-'70s. He was on, very, very fun shows that would be on daytime TV. Like, I remember Tattletales and Password, Win, Lose, or Draw, things like that. He was great in those as a game show host. Perfect for him. He's a comedic actor. This is just not a good fit for him. And so I think that this is really kind of a casting mistake in terms of putting him in the role of Doug Stafford. Leaving that aside, Doug Stafford is a lame schmuck at every imaginable level. I've already commented about Art. Art Stafford, played by John Siffer. He at least shows some competence. And, he kind of gets dragged down a little bit because of his brother, but, there is some lameness there as well. And overall, I look at this episode and I say, I look back at a few other episodes to which I had given, a C- or a D+ or whatever. The previous episode, Casino, for example, I commented that one was at that borderline, C-, D+. And would I say that this episode is better than that one? No, I don't think I can. I think that one was more entertaining overall. Your mileage may vary about that. You might say that, no, I enjoyed this a little bit more, and that's fine. But for me, I can't say that. I think that this one, I've struggled even to bring it up to D. I certainly can't bring it up any higher. And again, that's mostly because I feel I just can't get past that miscasting of Bert Convy in this episode. Well, here we are. We've wrapped up season 6. And just as we've said, I'm sure I've said, at the end of every season, we've had ups, we've had downs. Even in season 3, in the vaunted season 3, we had ups and downs. The writers and producers didn't hit a home run every time, not by any stretch of the imagination. There were a lot more ups in the previous seasons than there were downs, and here we did have our share of downs. We really did, but we did have some good ones as well. I think of episodes like Nerves and Encounter, and some of them were quite good. Anyway, we're moving on to season 7. Where, I've already mentioned about Linda Day George and her pregnancy, so, that will affect things a little bit in season 7, and you'll see how that will shake out. Like every season, there will be our share of clunkers, and there will be some high spots. I actually find myself, every time we come towards the end of a season, I find myself kind of gearing up, and I'm kind of mentally prepared. Okay, it's time to move on. I just kind of feel it. I really want to. And I am looking forward to at least talking about season 7 because, a lot of the things that I've talked about in the reviews up till now, we'll be able to discuss them. I'll be able to discuss them a little bit further and with a different perspective, and hopefully be able to point out, see, remember when we talked about that? Here we are again, and put kind of a little bit of a new spin on it. So I am kind of looking for it. I'll be back soon with the first episode of season 7, which is called Break. and I will see you then. Thank you as always for watching. Please like this video review. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and please leave your comments. And as I said, I will see you next time.